computer. Okay, we're set. We're ready for you um, when you're ready.
All right.
So our presentation is on Vocal ID, which is an AI voice synthesizer. And my name is Lola Dolinskey, she, her. I am in Mod 4 front end.
Carey, Caputo, she, her, front end. Synthetic voices have become ubiquitous. They feed us direction in the morning.
Turn left on West Elm Street.
We use them for text dictation, and we use them to make calls.
Calling Sam, the X.
And as these technologies improve, they are becoming more and more human sounding. At the age of 9, Siri is the oldest virtual assistant, but in the world of speaking machines, she's just a baby.
Think about all that's conveyed through your voice. We modify our pitch, loudness, and duration to convey our intent and emotion, like sarcasm, for instance, or urgency, or adoration. Voice metrics can also indicate identifiers like gender and age.
Imagine the sounds and voices you would hear in this crowded restaurant scene. And then imagine a pack of kids run by you. How would the audio change? Now imagine if every person in that room were using an AAC device. What is an AAC device? Lola?
An AAC device, it stands for Alternative and Augmentative Communication Device. It's used by individuals with disabilities that inhibit their ability to communicate verbally. So it might be due to a physical or cognitive impairment. For example, Parkinson's, stroke, ALS, traumatic brain injury, cerebral palsy, autism spectrum disorder, and profound and multiple learning disabilities.
So Rupal Patel heads a research group at Northeastern University, and she studies speech. And she was at an assistive technology conference where she witnessed a scene similar to the one you had imagined in that restaurant. She saw a conversation between a little girl and a grown man, both using different devices, but with the same voice. That robotic adult male voice that many of us associate with Stephen Hawking. And this was happening all over the conference. She saw this as the individual's identity being lost. So she teamed up with data scientists specializing in voice analysis and developers and sought a way to give people a unique voice print that reflected their age, size, lifestyle, and personality.
I love you. See you at the championship.
Max Plansky can't speak, but he has a voice. This is the story of how Max got his voice. Max Plansky has cerebral palsy. That means he doesn't have enough control of the muscles in his mouth and tongue to be able to speak. So he uses an alternative communication device, or AAC, to speak on his behalf. Lacking the motor skills to type sentences, Max pushes a button on his wheelchair's headrest to select pre-composed phrases he often uses.
How are you?
Or to type words letter by letter with his AAC.
Just because I'm in.
For years, only a limited range of voices has been available in devices that help people like Max communicate. Now, a technology-driven push is underway to create more personalized voices instead. Rupal Patel has been working to personalize the synthetic voices of people who don't have the ability to speak. A speech pathologist and computer science professor at Northeastern University, her research led her to found a startup called Vocal ID, which has developed its own method for creating individualized synthetic voices.
We tell a lot about people, or we know a lot about who it is that we're interacting with because of their voice. For someone who uses a device to talk, there's a barrier.
Really wide.
And that barrier is you're talking through a box, and that box is really quite generic.
So in my previous career before Turing, I was a speech language pathologist, and I worked with both children and adults who used alternative and augmentative communication devices. So the anecdote that Kara shared about Dr. Patel really rang true to me. And so when she came to me with this topic, I immediately hopped on board. So how Vocal ID works is a volunteer will provide 5 to 7 hours of vocal samples, and then a voice recipient who is involved in the program they'll try and record like even just some kind of vocalization, like a grunt or any sound that allows the synthesizer to determine what their fundamental frequency is or pitch or any kind of metric that they can get out of it. And then they will synthesize those two voices and match the recipient with the volunteer.
Creating an individualized synthetic voice involves blending the sounds that a person like Max can make. After recording those sounds, Dr. Patel's team searches the Vocal ID voice bank, a database full of audio recordings for the voice of a person that's close in age and size.
How are you today?
How are you today?
Vocal ID has been building its voice bank since December of 2014. Donors from anywhere in the world can contribute recordings through its website. While recording, donors are prompted to read a series of words and phrases that covers virtually every possible phonetic sound and combination of sounds in the English language.
So how might this impact us as developers? Voice machines are obviously a massive improvement from a complete inability to communicate. But once that initial MVP, if you will, is met for the user, it's our job as developers to know our users and to keep refining that experience for them. Push to add tone, gender, and ethnicity, and stuff to make this experience more personalized. Diversity and inclusion matter. Vocal ID is not just for individuals either. They also market their voices to brands and alert systems, as well as influencers, which we'll get into later. So there are psychological impacts of vocal cues. And so brands need to consider who they are trying to market to and whether or not the voice that they are using in their product is having the appropriate response that they're looking for.
There are obviously a lot of positives in this type of AI technology, including, matching people with giving people a voice that actually reflects their age, size, lifestyle, personality, and reflecting that person's true identity. But there are also other concerns with this kind of technology and AI in general. One of those concerns is who owns your data. So as a volunteer for a company like this that we initially thought was a nonprofit, but is actually a for-profit business. And well, they're a for-profit business, but your voice is being donated out of goodwill to a voice bank. And so who knows if you'll later hear your voice on an advertisement or something like that, or, in any other kind of nefarious way, your voice is used without your consent. And also, some metrics can be gathered from your voice that have to do with health. For instance, and the site makes it very clear that while they can gain some indicators about health conditions that might be coming up from your voice, such as if you have like a quiver in your vocal folds, that can be detected, and it might indicate something like MS or something like that, more so than just nervousness like I am facing right now. But those indicators are not going to be shared with the volunteers.
Yeah. So would you be willing to donate your voice? Ultimately, initially we had thought we would be willing, and then by the end, we had changed our position. So thank you.
Thank you all. This is super compelling and interesting topic and conversation. I'd love for you all that have opinions to get in the chat and let's get it going in there. I think that this could be some like enriching discussion in here because this is just an interesting thing to think about. So thanks, Lola. Thanks, Kara. Next up, we have Aaron.
I'm still muted, sorry. Howdy, everybody. Lord, where is there we go, present. My name is Aaron Townsend. I'm in the 2008 front-end cohort. I'm going to be speaking about behavioral biometrics today. And kind of, well, I'll just, come on, you can go. There we go. Kind of, I'm going to be talking about that, what that is, why it's kind of being used, why it is used really. I'll provide some examples, some pros and cons, and I was obviously going to take questions, but I guess we're going to trim that down. So behavioral biometrics, it's basically talking about, it's meaning, any behavior that you have like while handling technology, really, like how you interact with sites, how long you stay there, how you deal with what you're searching for. And it checks these patterns and like kind of manipulates and repeats them and understands like what kind of user it is dealing with, who you are. And it's become quite helpful in distinguishing who is authenticated, like who is accessing which sites, what you are using, and if you are the correct person like that you say you are, and whether or not it's malicious activity or not. And it's supposed to be used to protect users' information and personal data. But as you can see, like in the previous presentation, that's not always the case. But it's supposed to be helpful and make navigating these sites easier. So some examples of these are just kind of like how you write your name, really. Like you can measure like how you're doing that, how the pressure and direction of the way you write, the reflection of who you are. There's voice recognition, which is, I'm not going to go too into depth on that because we just heard about it. But it's being used in like online banking services and customer service, like phone lines. So like whenever you're, or at least for me, like whenever I've been like on the phone with like energy companies or even like with Amazon and such, like it recognizes like that you're speaking and like whether you want to connect with somebody. Another one that I really liked was gait recognition. So the way people walk, and so it analyzes how you walk, like whether you have a limp or like just your movement in general, and so it can identify pretty accurately who you are. So that's seen in The Punisher. Like that's pretty cool. I really like that. I mean, it's accurate. Some of the disadvantages of it, like these hacking and fraud manipulations, people are able to get into user information, and so they're trying to use behavioral biometrics to make it more secure, but it can be biased as well, like as seen below. And so we have to be more diligent in like the way we are analyzing or what data that's being brought in and like how we're viewing it. And so we need to broaden that horizons of like who we're looking at, what kind of people we're like taking data from, how many, what's being analyzed. And I'm sure that maybe also with sites like social media, where you're seeing all these ads targeted towards you as well, can be pretty creepy as well. So that's another thing. And some of the advantages of it are useful for verifying and authenticating who is being, what users are accessing what sites, and making sure that they are the correct user. And so it's trying to make sure that we're dealing with the right people and authenticating the right people and making sure we're not doing malicious activities. It's supposed to be helpful in time consumption and user friendly, and it's pretty helpful as well, and in recognizing that certain aspects of who you are. But I would be taking questions, but I'll just instead say thanks and gig 'em.
Great, appreciate it, Aaron. Yeah, if you have some questions, follow-up questions for Aaron on any of the biometric stuff that he presented, then definitely hit him up in the chat. Okay, let's go to Shaunda next.
Cool. All right, are the slides coming through okay? Awesome, thanks. All right, let me move this. All right. Hi, I'm Shaunda, she, her pronouns. So while entering, we gain a lot of information, right, about what troubles the tech industry. So everything from bias in our tech to diversity in the industry itself. So what's somewhat missing from these topics, I feel, is once we're in these tech roles, how do we actually change our workplace culture? And even more so, how do we push the companies we work for to make impactful and positive changes? It's not simply enough to have the right ideas. We need to find a way to spread them and fight for them. And that's why I want to talk about workplace activism. So this is a topic that can go pretty deep. So the goal of this talk is really to give you an overview and hopefully inspire you to struggle for change in your future roles. I'll define workplace activism and give you some examples of successful actions. We'll also talk a little bit about the working conditions and impacts in tech that need changing, then jump into some strategies we can use inside of our workplaces to fight for change. So what is workplace activism? Whenever a group of employees get together to make some sort of direct action against their employer to demand some sort of change, whether that be protests, petitions, union drives, walkouts, and strikes, that is workplace activism. It's really just people who share a common workplace coming together to let the leaders know of that organization, like, hey, something needs to change. For example, we can look at the massive Google walkout in 2018, where globally 20,000 Google employees walked out of their offices to protest the company's handling of a sexual harassment claim against a C-level offender. Many of these demands were actually met by Google, including an end to forced arbitration, which shows the leverage this kind of organizing can have in demanding actionable changes quickly. So we know that activism works, like in the workplace, and even better, a growing number of workers in the tech industry actually believe in its efficacy. So according to KRC research report titled Employee Activism in the Age of Purpose, we have hard data that show that employees are raising their hands and voices at work about what's right and what's wrong. 4 in 10 employees, or 38%, reported that they have spoken up to support or criticize their employer's actions over a controversial issue that affects society. And over 70% of millennial workers believe that they can make an even greater impact on our world than the leaders who actually run those organizations. And I think this data really highlights the perception of workers and the growing confidence in workplace activism to promote change. We are also seeing, specific to the tech industry, that the number of actions are increasing year over year. So in 2019, more than 100 actions were reported to Collective Actions in Tech, which is an open source database. And this is a large growth over previous years, and it actually keeps increasing. These actions range from unionization efforts, like over 700 Google ABC workers signing union cards to form their own union in January of this year, to solidarity actions, like Amazon engineers joining forces with warehouse workers to fight for better conditions on warehouse floors. I really recommend checking out that repo for Collective Actions in Tech. It's really inspiring to see people in our industry joining forces to make worthwhile change in so many different areas. So what are the areas, right, that the tech industry workers are struggling to improve? So you've heard some of these issues either through the training curriculum or possibly here today. The tech industry isn't without its flaws. From supply chain issues to privacy violations and harmful impacts on climate change, there's really no lack of areas for workers to come together and struggle to push towards more positive impacts. So how do we actually apply workforce activism to challenge our workplaces and taking a stand against some of these practices? We organize. So what's actually really cool about workplace activism in the tech space specifically is that tech workers, especially those in STEM related roles, have a super unique position that gives us leverage to fight for and win reforms. Most notably is supply and demand, right? With demand for skilled tech workers outstripping the supply, we have a much more secure position to leverage our value. And by this, I mean it's a lot harder for companies to broadly fire an entire engineering team, right, than say line level warehouse workers for participating in workplace actions. We're also more connected than ever. With more and more global tech companies, we have the ability to mobilize many more workers through collaboration on the internet. It's fast, relatively effortless, and anonymous. It makes it way more appealing to workers than going through bureaucratized, lengthy internal processes. So what are some ways, right, that we can get started to actually affecting those positive impacts in our workplaces? How do we go from recognizing and understanding a problem to spreading our ideas and struggling for change? While this is certainly not an exhaustive list, here are some ways you can get moving. First, talk with your coworkers, right? Find out what issues they see the company contributing to and take the pulse on whether they'd be open to organizing in some way, whether that be circulating a petition or writing an open letter. Anything will do, right? And make sure you also branch out from your team or your specific space. Get to know people at the pressure points, warehouse workers, call centers. Often you'll be able to better understand issues they particularly face a lot better and can help build solidarity amongst the workplace company-wide. And there also may already be spaces your coworkers have already created. So unions, Slack channels, clubs, meetups. If spaces like this exist, join them. If not, consider organizing them yourself. So that's all I have. Thanks so much. I hope you consider taking some positive change in the future. And here are my resources.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shaunda. I think there was a request in the chat for one of those repos that you mentioned. Yeah, and my 2 cents is unionize. Cool. Up next, we have Zach.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach Stearns, he, him, backend mod 4, and I'm presenting on internet addiction and mental health. And I'll start with a trigger warning. I want to stress that nearly everyone is affected in some way or another by some of this, and I don't mean to make anyone uncomfortable. But that being said, let's start with the good. The digital age of global connectivity began in 1992 when the internet became widely available for home use. Since then, technology has evolved to bring the ability to connect instantaneously over platforms like Zoom, Snapchat, and Facebook. We can tune into our friends' concerts in New York, talk to our grandparents in Singapore, and order your favorite restaurant's meal to your doorstep in seconds. You can even find your new soulmate. But there is also plenty of knowledge at our fingertips. How many of us use Google Maps on a daily basis? Who gets their news from the morning paper anymore? Pinterest and YouTube have given us a wealth of knowledge from car maintenance to recipes to arts and crafts. And let me be clear, I've utilized all of these tools. All of these wonderful things bring about a source of happiness, wisdom, and even a sense of belonging into our community. However, how many of us fall into traps? In thinking about my habits during my time at Turing, I realized that especially since the pandemic started, I've been quite addicted to social media. For me, it's not Facebook, it's not Snapchat, my vice is Reddit. I sometimes find myself taking a break from my 12 hours in front of a screen at Turing by spending more time in front of a screen. Apps like Reddit can be extremely useful with countless communities, fan groups, how-tos, and advice, but the infinite scroll and always new content can really suck you in. But it's not the worst it can do. The instant connection to our digital world is breeding a consciousness of instant gratification. Gone are the days of dial-up. We no longer suffer the burden of buffering time that compromises your house's ability to make a phone call. These days, who would stick around for a 10-second wait time, 8 seconds, or even 5 seconds? The report to the right shows just how quickly our attention span is dropping. On top of that, the infinite span of media is pulling us in all directions. When looking into Twitter's global daily hashtag leaderboards, a hashtag stayed in the top 50 for an average of 17.5 hours in 2013, decreasing to 11.9 hours in 2016. Not only is our general awareness shifting, so is the self-perception of our youth. We're seeing the rise of Snapchat dysmorphia. Young adults, mostly women, are tying their post likes, or the lack thereof, to their sense of worthiness, taking the comments they receive to heart. Let's remember, 2009 is the year that social media became widely available on mobile devices. Since 2009, we have seen a 62% jump in ER visits from self-harm in girls aged 15 to 19, and a 189% jump in girls aged 10 to 14. With the ability for anyone you know to peer into the life you post, hateful judgment is no longer confined to the gossip circles on the playground. Harm to a child's mental health doesn't come from others. Sometimes just a little bit of curiosity can go a long way. Plenty of studies show that the average age that a child is exposed to online pornography is roughly age 12. This can distort fundamental instincts of love and attraction, tainting what a healthy, intimate relationship looks like. Long-term porn addiction can lead to decreased satisfaction in one's partner. High exposure to content can lead to men feeling emotions like distrust, rejection, and abandonment, while women often view themselves as sexually undesirable. Not only that, but approximately 1 in 3 women are victim of image-based sexual abuse. These are only a couple of the countless impacts the age of the internet is bringing. Having anything you want at your fingertips comes with the risk of a silent addiction to dopamine. This affects groups of all ages and is almost unavoidable. So, what can be done? Take a dopamine detox, disable your push notifications, turn on airplane mode when it's time to wind down for bed, carve out more time for being in nature instead of in front of a screen, and engage with your people. When it comes to youth, we must remember that to them, the very meaning of communication includes technology. Teach your kids early on that this is not the truth. There are much more valuable ways to connect with one another. Take the time to validate their personal value, beauty, and worthiness. Teach them that the internet can be a slippery slope in many different ways, some more serious than others. Set screen time limits on devices for yourself and for your children. Google has tools to do this through their Family Link platform. You can set timers for the time allowed on a device, lock out device usage until a specific time of day, and set approval requirements for apps your child wants to download. There are other apps on the market like Moment and Quality Time that give you reports on how you're using your screen time so that you can better identify your habits and addictions. And look, changing how you view the internet isn't easy, but the first step is realizing how its impact easily flies under the radar. By now, all of you have likely put in more than 1,000 hours in front of a screen since starting your time at Turing, so I encourage you to use this intermission coming up to focus on what's important. Don't be like this guy. Spend some time with those who matter most. Take the moment to watch spring unfold before your eyes as the grass gets greener and the days get warmer, because before you know it, you'll be wondering how your lawn got completely green seemingly overnight. Remember that there is only one person who defines your relationship with technology. Beware, with great power comes great responsibility. Keep your eyes open and your reflection honest, and you'll find the perfect balance that's right for you. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Zach. Got some reflections happening in the chat. And yeah, I would encourage you all to, if you haven't already, watch The Social Dilemma. It's an interesting film kind of on this attention topic. And yeah, it's something, it's super important. I know, like me personally, I don't have like a ton of notifications because I can't work with them enabled. And yeah, I'm not on Instagram anymore because of like, it's too addicting. So anyways, hopefully some food for thought. And yeah, so we're about 30 minutes in. Joshua is next. Let's take a quick break. Let's take 4 minutes and come back at 35, and then we'll get started with Joshua.
All right. Feels self-conscious after everyone's previous slides are so good. Can everyone see my slides or my slide? Okay, great. My name is Joshua Carey, 2008 backend, and for my presentation on tech, censorship, and regulation, I'm going to focus predominantly on Facebook and freedom. of expression. This presentation is inspired by Radiolab's Post No Evil from 2018. So, a group of mothers in Palo Alto protest Facebook taking down photos of them breastfeeding because they were flagged as pornographic. A female comedian gets her post removed and her account blocked after posting "Kill all men" and "Men are scum." These are just two examples from the episode Post No Evil, which explores how exactly Facebook determines which content is allowed on their platform and which is not. At the beginning of Facebook, they had a single page document that outlined community standards for content moderation. These standards were non-specific rules generally preventing nudity and graphic violence, and advised moderators that if it makes you feel bad, take it down. The vagueness and subjectivity and guidelines, as well as the nuance in online posts such as breastfeeding mothers, required that this document be edited and edited and edited again and again over time. And what I'm especially interested in with this story is the process by which Facebook developed their guidelines. In some ways, it is not unlike the development of the body of law. However, it is different in that each of these cases were without due process, and development of the rulebook has largely been a secretive operation, with small groups of people making decisions on the policies that govern a platform now used by billions of people. The process has been largely undemocratic. Highlighted here is one controversial example as to why this is problematic. The question, who do we protect, white men or Black children, is from a leaked Facebook training document. And according to Facebook's policy at the time, the answer was white men. The reasoning for the answer and the policy is semi-based on US anti-discrimination law, which says that you cannot attack people based on a protected characteristic such as race, religion, or gender. Since age is not a protected characteristic, children, according to Facebook's policy, would be a non-protected modifier, which makes Black children a non-protected category. Any content attacking non-protected categories would be allowed based on this policy. As another example, men are trash is not allowed, but Bill is trash would be allowed since Bill is a non-protected category. The policy is clearly flawed. So there are many, many examples as to why internet platforms need to censor content, not least of which are the DC riots, incited in large part by social media posts from our previous US president. But from a legal perspective, internet platforms are generally protected from user content. According to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, internet platforms are protected from being responsible for what users post on their platform. And there are exceptions to this, of course. Even still, tech companies tend to have more restrictive guidelines regarding speech compared to the US government. Under the First Amendment, the government is prohibited from limiting most forms of speech, but this prohibition does not apply to private business. For example, hate speech is protected as free speech under the First Amendment, but hate speech would be flagged and removed on most internet platforms. So there are laws that exist to protect tech companies from what users post on their sites, but there are currently no laws governing how these companies should moderate user content. It is largely up to the tech companies to decide how to do this. And as we've seen, this can be problematic, and it gives these companies a tremendous amount of power, especially now that their platforms are ubiquitous. To illustrate just how much users depend on these platforms, for the first time in 2018, newspaper readership fell behind social media readership. So undeniably, tech companies hold an immense amounts of power and influence on modern culture. Driven by business pursuits, it is clear that these companies do not always have their users' best interests in mind, nor are the consequences of their internal decisions immediately obvious. There has been growing concern about tech companies' unfettered power for a while now, and there are political movements from both Republicans and Democrats to try to rein in some of this power, in part by dissolving Section 230. Facebook has definitely been vocal in this conversation, and in an attempt to partner with governments and lead the discussion in online governance, Facebook released the document Charting a Way Forward in February of 2020. The document reviews 4 key questions listed here. The challenges of the first question from Facebook's perspective is they are constantly hearing from users that they want the company to reduce online abuse while not infringing upon the freedom of expression, and from governments, they are pressured to remove not only illegal content, but also legal content that may contribute to harm, and to do so in an unbiased way. Furthermore, they desire to maintain a uniform product experience across different countries, laws, cultures, and these paradoxical impossible standards and the catastrophic consequences that could result in mishandling them indicates, to me at least, that outside regulation is a must. But where should that come from? From the government? Well, it seems the government seems to be a necessary choice from a legal perspective, but tech companies innovate much faster than the government's ability to keep up with the industry. Furthermore, leaders in the government can easily be bought with tech dollars. Consumers absolutely have the power to opt out of platforms for others, but this hardly seems a satisfactory or effective option because in light of all of Facebook's recent scandals, people are still using Facebook. Other tech companies, since they are more or less in the same boat, typically collaborate more than anything, but maybe this is an example of the tides turning. In this example, this ad is Facebook's response to Apple's new privacy policy, which bans apps from sharing iPhone user behavior with third parties without explicit user consent. This policy targets in part Facebook's unethical use of user data and demonstrates possibly a new standard of peer regulation. Just maybe some questions to think about, maybe add in the chat. Should tech companies be regulated in how they censor content? If so, how? And if not, why not? Yeah, thanks for your time. Here are my resources.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joshua. Definitely an important and murky topic. Encourage y'all to discuss in the chat if you have feelings or thoughts either way. Cool. So next up, we've got Mike and JP.
Ooh.
Cool. Let me get this going.
Awesome. I'm JP, front end, mod 4, he, him.
I'm Mike, front end, mod 4, he, him.
And we're going to talk to you a little bit about pretty much what Joshua was talking about at the end there with ad privacy with Facebook versus Apple.
Okay, when did that work?
So have you ever wondered like how you see such relevant ads on Facebook or YouTube, Snapchat? And sometimes it's like literally minutes after you looked at a product on like a homepage or something.
Well, you're being tracked. So social media companies have tracking pixels, Facebook pixel, Instagram pixel, so on and so forth. So when you go to a consumer page that has something to sell you, and then go to Facebook, all of a sudden you see a targeted ad from that site you just visited.
Right. So this is a form of advertisement called targeted ads. It's one of the most effective ways of advertising because these companies can basically, these small companies that use platforms like Facebook can basically build large audiences that are already interested in their product, and it allows them to kind of expand and track those users and their movements over 14 days after they looked at their products. These come in the form of pixels, like we said, and the pixels come on script tags that you would put in like the head of your HTML document. Mike, if you don't mind me sharing, I will show what a pixel looks like. So so again, it's kind of like a cookie. If I go to Hubble Contacts, see, right now I have a Facebook pixel helper, just as a Chrome extension to tell you if there's a pixel on the page that you're on or not. If I go to hubblecontacts.com right now, you'll see this will populate with 2 pixels. One is just saying like, okay, this person landed on the page. If I were to click around here, you might also get pixels that would fire saying like, this person clicked on this part of the page to see if they wanted astigmatism lenses or something. Now, if Facebook is running ads like if Hubble's running ads on Facebook right now, then like the third ad I'd see on Facebook right now would probably be a Hubble ad. Cool.
Oops, click again. Here's some memes.
Yeah, we got some memes for you.
Okay. It's hard timing that stuff. So what we're focusing on is there's an incoming iOS update on Apple iPhones. soon, they say springtime, so it's coming around the corner, but it's going to be a prompt on all Apple devices asking users whether or not they want to be allow apps to be tracked, allow themselves to be tracked against multiple apps. And it's called app tracking transparency.
Yeah, so this will be like a massive modal, like you can't miss it. You'll see it, and there's a lot of people expecting that up to 80% of users will opt out, saying, no, I don't want to be tracked across multiple applications. So this obviously would like do some damage to like Facebook and smaller businesses.
And so the expected outcome right now is Facebook ads could eventually be too expensive. It's kind of like the scales of economy. More people buy, the cheaper things become. And so when it becomes too expensive compared to the conversion rates, marketers are going to have to find new routes and to target their audiences. The big thing nowadays is paying influencers, TV ads, or, like they did back in the day, door-to-door salesmen and women with their suitcases of knives and whatever you might bring to a user.
Yeah, so as you could imagine, the biggest opposition to this would be Facebook, but there's, like Google on YouTube as well does a lot of targeted ads, and like Snapchat as well. And then also the small businesses or large businesses that use Facebook's platform to advertise. Facebook itself, as Joshua showed, is taking out like full page advertisements against Apple about this, basically saying they're going to crush small businesses.
Apple's philosophy is that there really shouldn't be free apps. Consumers should pay for them, and that there's no ads baked in. So you would never have a free app again, because as the saying goes, if something's free, you're the product. And so when the consumer pays, they are entitled to transparency.
Yeah, and Facebook's, like many other tech companies, is quite the opposite, right? They think that it should be free, but the users pay for it through ads. And obviously transparency is like a terrible thing for Facebook running ads. And like their philosophy is that if it's not illegal, then why should Apple be the ones who are regulating this market?
Currently, there are really no consumer privacy laws, and there are current advocates for it. You might have heard Andrew Yang campaigning for being able to monetize your own personal data, that companies shouldn't be able to make money off of your data. They should be paying you for it. The government should be the one making regulations, but
yeah, but the government doesn't actually know how Facebook even makes money. Like, we won't play a video or anything, but this is a screenshot from Mark Zuckerberg in front of the Senate explaining to them how Facebook makes ads. They're asking him, oh, like if you don't charge them for your app downloads, how do you make money? And it's just kind of comical, him explaining to them how ads work. Yeah.
So thoughts here. Does Apple actually care about the consumer protection and transparency? Are they just trying to get a cut of every app that's on their marketplace? Transparency is bad for business, but in the end, it's better for the consumer. Marketing will survive. It's just they're going to have to adjust and get creative, and Facebook will struggle up front, but I'm sure they'll find a workaround.
Yeah, so again, this app download hasn't been prompted yet because there's all sorts of people trying to stop. It will happen, but people are trying to postpone it until maybe after the pandemic. We'll see. It's an evolving story.
And just for food for thought for your end as a coder, like if you go to an advertising firm or try to generate or design a site to generate business, how are you going to design and figure out that workaround?
Thanks.
Cool, much appreciated, Mike and JP. So yeah, we're done a little early, so I think what I'd like to do is open it up to questions for any of the presenters at all. If you have anything, then yeah, let's use the raise hand feature and we can open it up for discussion. Great. Go ahead, Robert.
Great job, everyone. These were all really great presentations, I thought. Really thought-provoking for sure. I guess one of the things that I'm wondering, especially with regards to privacy, is how much do you think the average American is actually going to care? Because it seems like if it comes down to like paying for an app versus, because I know I've paid, I don't know, like $5 for an app, or even maybe Anki was like $30, I think, to use their mobile version, which was, I was perfectly happy to do. But I'm wondering if the general American then is going to be willing to do that, or if they, when it comes to privacy, if it's just like, and then it's going to come down to, say, the technocrats to figure out what to do.
I'm sure it just comes down to a lack of overall education with the American public about privacy and data. Because if you look at the government, no one knows at this point. And so I think if it gets into the national picture and educate people on like how they're actually using your data, like the hyper targeted advertisings for political purposes, stuff like that, the big data analytics, there could be some movement in the other way, but
yeah, I think the part of it is like it's unpredictable. We don't actually know how all users are going to react to something like that, like transparency. Some people might actually want to be targeted for ads because their ads will be much more relevant than if they weren't being targeted. So it's kind of hard to say. One thing that like Facebook doesn't like right now is that it's just change, right? Like they have this good thing going right now. It's been working. These small businesses have been able to use their platform and they've been successful with it. And now they have to get creative.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, an interesting documentary that I saw that kind of goes into some of this stuff and makes it a little bit easier for a layperson to understand is Terms and Conditions May Apply. If anyone's ever seen that one, kind of goes into like how, like what kinds of rights are you really signing away and what are they doing with your data?
Seems who actually reads the end user license agreements and all that stuff? Because I know every once, like back in the day, I would just every once in a while I'd be like, oh, interesting, and I know sometimes companies will put, of course, all sorts of things in there, and I know for certain creators, especially of particular forms of content in the arts, there was some nervousness over like whether Facebook would own, say, the photo that you had or whatever, and how specifically copyright regulations would apply to that. And it would be curious to see how that all ends up playing out.
Yeah.
I guess it's interesting to think about like what the alternatives are and like if there are any in our current ecosystem. And I guess if we thought of like a subscription model to the internet where you own all your data and you aren't tracked as much, like how much are we willing to pay? Like we're already paying our ISP and then now we have to pay per site. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, especially then too, I guess if you were, say you had to pay for Facebook as a subscription and you were somebody below the poverty line, that would be much more difficult. And say if you wanted to start a business or something, then it would be much more difficult to do that. And it seems like then if the only option is to give off your privacy rights, then it seems like that would just be what you would have to do. But I wonder then what the alternative could be to get around that.
Anyone else have other thoughts or questions for any of the presenters? All right, in that case, we'll wrap up early. Just want to say thank you to all the Mod 4 students for your presentations. They were great. and I enjoyed them for sure. I'm sure the students did as well. Cool. See you at Code Fair.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.